Smoke your hog, get out your bib, solid, picking a rib. Out the keys to a barbecue and start picking a rib.
And kept on picking.
Good for them, good for me and you, so let's start picking too. Old King Cole came out of a hole by picking a rib. Picking, smoked the hog on a red hot log, called it a barbecue. Say, stomping chicken, we've got a new creation. Say, you better start picking, cause barbecue's taking the nation.
It's time for Pickin' and Flickin' in the Nostril Zone, where we pick a book off my shelf and flick through it. What else could that mean? I'm your host, cartoonist Kyle Bridget, and before we jump into it, make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, be a ding-dong daddy, and ding that bell. Today we're looking at H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness by R.J. Ivankovic. It says for beginner readers only. That's not true, but this is here because this is, of course, emulating Dr. Seuss's inimitable, or I guess in this case, imitable style. I just got this for Christmas from my wife. We're both H.P. Lovecraft fans, and last year I got her H.P. Lovecraft's The Call of Cthulhu by R.J. Ivankovic, and she liked it. So this year, I started dropping hints that I might get her At the Mountains of Madness. And I believe this book just came out. Let's see here. It came out in 2024, but I believe it actually came out like late in 24, like right at the beginning of December. And so I suggested that I would get her this book, At the Mountains of Madness, and she told me in no uncertain terms that she doesn't like this story at all. And she even wrote inside the book here, Merry Christmas, objectively the most boring Lovecraft tale. Enjoy. But I actually disagree with her. I really like At the Mountains of Madness. And in some ways, I think I like it more than Call of Cthulhu, which I do really enjoy as well. But I think Mountains of Madness, it has a little bit more going on in terms of weird Lovecraftian creatures and and Cthulhu's in it. So could be that Call of Cthulhu, I've just read it too many times and it's been adapted so many times that I'm kind of bored with it. And this book is a little more novel. But either way, I like both stories. And we're going to flick through At the Mountains of Madness here, but you can see that Call of Cthulhu by R.J. Ivankovic looks great. And if you flip to the end here, you'll see that he actually has an ad for H.P. Lovecraft's Dagon, which is another H.P. Lovecraft story that I love. So I guess there's at least 3 of these Seussian adaptations of Lovecraft out there now. So, I might pick up Dagon if I see it around. And they're put out by Chaosium Inc, or Chaosium Inc, which is a company that mostly publishes tabletop role-playing manuals, I believe, including the Call of Cthulhu tabletop role-playing game. So these books might not quite have the distribution that, a Fantagraphics or like a Drawn and Quarterly or an IDW have, because, they're mainly publishing these gaming books. So, maybe you can't pick this up at a regular bookstore. I know we got both these from our local comic store, which has a great selection, Strange Adventures. Shout out to Callum. But you can definitely pick these up at the Chaosium website. And I strongly recommend picking these up because this is definitely a book that you're going to want to read over and over and over again. In part because it's written in the same anapestic tetrameter that most of the Dr. Seuss books are written in, and also The Night Before Christmas. So if you happen to check out the Potter ZB non-denominational holiday special, we read The Night Before Christmas, illustrated by Will Elder in Panic magazine from 1954. So check that out too. But in case you don't know, the anapestic tetrameter, it's the same meter that The Night Before Christmas was written in all these Dr. Seuss books. So it's like, we discover great things I'd no reason to doubt when the ship's Miskatonic and Arkham set out. So it's that da-da-da, 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 da-da-da. And it moves at a really satisfying clip. It's a great little beat, and it's a lot of fun for telling stories and for reading out loud. And it works really well here, and of course, because Dr. Seuss did it. And speaking of Dr. Seuss, Ivankovic does such a great job at capturing the Seussian style. You know, he's got all the little flourishes, like these signs here, Antarctic expedition here and there. You know, Dr. Seuss loved to have all the directional signs that went everywhere. You see lots of examples in those books. And as for these ships here, I gotta imagine that this scene here is very much inspired by this scene in Oh Say Can You Say, which was one of my favorite Dr. Seuss books as a kid. I loved making my dad read all the tongue twisters. He's just lucky I never had Fox and Socks as a kid. And he's got, you know, a lot of the elements of the sails and the way the masts sort of bend and stuff. And even the docks here, the way it curves in this zigzag Z direction, you know, I think is repeated here in the illustrations. And although I think Ivankovic does a great job of capturing the Seussian vibe, I think he kind of missed an opportunity here to make this dock a little more rickety and wobbly, like Seuss has it here. But, you know, obviously he's not actually Dr. Seuss. You know, Ivankovic does such a great job emulating the style, albeit a little spookier, which is appropriate for Lovecraft. So here it's relating the events of this Arctic expedition sponsored by the Pickin Foundation to the Antarctic. They're digging in the ice with this drilling machine by Dr. Frank Pabodie. And the first thing they find are these strange rocks, which turn out to be fossilized footprints of unknown creatures, which is very odd because they come from a time before life had developed feet. So very strange and disturbing. So they discuss it with Miskatonic Professor Lake, and they decide to take these weird flying machines to go try and find more fossils. But one of the flying ships malfunctions, and so they have to make an emergency landing right next to this strange giant mountain face. And they dig down in the ice and they find this cavern with these weird frozen creatures. And I like this skull here in the in the cross section, you know, very much like a Simpsons or some mad chicken fat. And so they recover 14 elder things. And I think this is probably one of my favorite pages in the books. And they have all these elder things depicted with their weird starfish-shaped heads and triangular feet and membranous wings. Some of them are mutilated. So these elder things, they start to thaw out, but they can't really dissect them. They can't quite figure it out. And so the team split up, and Professor Lake's team stays behind and makes camp. But something happens, and there's no further contact from Lake. Like I said, they can't get a hold of Lake, and they go back to try to see what happened, and something happens, but they won't say what, and they ended up covering it up and never telling anyone. But now that the Starkweather Moor expedition is planned to go to Antarctica, they're basically telling us, the reader, as that expedition, what happened when they went to look for Lake. So firstly, when they get there, they can't tell exactly what happened, but some equipment's missing, and all the men and their dogs have been torn to shred and dissected and salted right there in their beds. And it's like something out of, The Thing. And they search high and low all over the place, and they discover these 6 graves, which inside each grave is a dead elder thing. So they don't know what happened, but they count the bodies, and one person's missing, Gedney, and a sled dog. And so they think that maybe he went mad and something happened. So they decide to go out searching for him. So they fly over the mountain peaks, and they come across this strange ancient city with these cyclopean spires half buried in snow. Of course, this scene is, very reminiscent of the beginning of Oh, the Places You Go, which is one of Seuss's most popular books. Apparently, every year at graduation time, it's a bestseller. It's a perennial hit. But sort of at the beginning, when they're flying out on these balloon races over the landscape, over the weird Seussian landscapes, they discover this 5-pointed structure with like millions of years of snow and ice filling it up, so they can't get there. And they keep looking around the city trying to find the missing expedition member. Danforth isn't doing so well. He's starting to lose his mind a little bit. They hear this weird tekali sound. Then they find an opening in the wall and they're able to enter one of the strange buildings. This whole monochrome with a complementary color, this style of coloring really reminds me of one of the stories in the Sneetches and other stories, and I guess other Seuss books. He went through a series of different kinds of approaches to color to save money on printing. So some books, some of the pages would be black and white and others would be color. But then there was a whole bunch of them where they would be printed with just 2 colors. And so like this book, the Sneetches, uses this kind of like bluish color and a yellow, and so they can also make green, and he uses it very effectively. And this empty pants story, this is kind of a horror story for Seuss. This is one of the more scary Seuss stories, almost Lovecraftian, and the way he uses like the yellows with the dark kind of bluish green colors and the green pants. You know, it really creates this vibe. And Ivankovic, he clearly has other colors that he's working with, but often he's evoking this 2-color style to evoke the Dr. Seuss books of old, and it works really well. So they find these strange hieroglyphs carved in the walls that, you know, have like star maps and reveal a history that completely upsets any kind of understanding of history or astronomy that we might have. And it turns out they were carved by the Elder Things millions of years ago. And Professor William Dyer, who is our main character, I don't know if I mentioned that, but he attempts to relate the story as well as he can. But the gist of it is that hundreds of millions of years ago, the old ones crossed space and colonized Earth. And they built their giant city using these amorphous blob creatures called Shoggoths, which they're able to mind control. And then they get to work with their genetic experiments, making all kinds of creatures for labor and some to eat, including these simian creatures prized for their meat, which of course are like monkey creatures that eventually evolved into humans, just because they kind of stayed out of the way. And were not a bother. But, you know, it's not all sunny days, because eventually the Cthulhu star spawn come to Earth, and there's a great war that is fought to a stalemate, but eventually they divvy up the planet. So the Elder Things, they retreat to the ocean, and the star spawn of Cthulhu take the land for Cthulhu's coming awful plans. And I think this Cthulhu here just looks so good in the Seussian style. I think it looks even better than he did in the Call of Cthulhu book. Like, I think he got better at drawing in a Seussian style. It's much nicer. The line weight's nicer. And I always love Cthulhu kind of coming out of the ocean and, you know, just looking so impossibly large. But eventually Cthulhu's city of R'lyeh sinks into the ocean. And I just think this, you know, non-Euclidean geometry of R'lyeh is just tailor-made for a Seussian interpretation. If we look here at the secret art of Dr. Seuss, you can see some of this just weird, surreal architecture that Seuss was into. Really, the book that I wish I had here to show, that I think probably had better examples of this, is Happy Birthday to You. But I don't know where that book is. I might not even have that at the house. I might be at my dad's house or something. But you can see here that Dr. Seuss's style is really conducive to illustrating the lost city of R'lyeh. And more troubles for the Elder Things. The Shoggoths become more intelligent, and they rebel against their masters. Of course, the Elder Things are able to quash the rebellion using their anti-molecular weapons. But that's not the end of it, because the Migo arrive, the fungi from Yuggoth. I wish we got their brain cases. And then they have a great war with the Elder Things. And the Elder Things don't fare so well against them, and they unfortunately discover that their wings that they used to use to traverse the cosmos have atrophied in their millennias on Earth, and they've become basically vestigial, and this really affects their ability to fight the Migo, and kind of causes their empire to really crumble, and they can't escape. And what's left of them retreat underground, which is where we find Dyer and Danforth as they smell the faint smell of spilt gasoline, which is evidence of the missing Gedney. So they follow the fumes. They find some supplies from their camp, some gas, some ink, and some weird alien maps of the underground city. And eventually they find the body of poor Gedney under a tarp, along with his sled dog. They've been neatly preserved, which they presume is to be studied later. But then they find these weird 6-foot-tall albino penguins standing around, which is very, very spooky. And as they go deeper and deeper, the hieroglyphs seem to get more ancient, and they find more of these weird penguins. And as they get deeper and deeper, the temperature is rising, and so they're kind of stripping off clothes because they're getting so warm. And these weird roads here, this again reminds me of The Places You Go, and other Dr. Seuss books, but just these weird kind of thick paths. Here they're kind of floating, but The Places You Go, they're kind of just slap down on the weird grass like a ganache on a cake. I think this is probably a bit of an influence. Very Seussian. They keep going, and then they find this horrific scene of these slaughtered elder things. So you can see this book is definitely not for kids. And Dyer expresses a bit of pity for the elder things, because they're not just weird creatures, they're sentient beings. He describes them as if they're men. But then they hear the sound again, really close this time. Tekali-lee! And it scares the piss out of them, and they take off running, and they're expecting it to be elder things coming after them. But as Dyer describes, it's even more disturbing and indescribable. Of course, it's the great Shoggoth screaming, Tekali-lee! And it's this, hideous, amorphous, gelatinous blob with these iridescent eyes. Classic, indescribable Lovecraftian horror. So they're running for their life. They duck behind the penguins, trying to get a little bit of cover. They make it to the surface and to their plane, and Dyer takes the controls because Danforth has been losing his mind this whole time. So they look back and they see this giant pulsating blob that's indescribable, but they try to describe it as a cylinder without a name. The Elder Pharaohs, the Black Pit, a white jelly, the color from space, the old Shoggoth race, Yog-Sothoth, and basically all of the Lovecraft mythos names. They don't mean anything, but they all sound terrifying. And Danforth, when he's not completely insane, he has moments of clarity. He says that he got these names from the old Necronomicon written by the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazrad. But the rest of the time, when he's not lucid, he just spends it shouting, Tekali-lee! Because he was driven insane by the indescribable sights that he's seen. Which is a constant theme in Lovecraft, the horrors that are so alien to our experience that they drive you mad. And I really enjoyed this book. I thought I wasn't going to enjoy it as much of the Call of Cthulhu book by Ivankovic, and part of that is the cover. I mean, you can see how the cover of this is quite a bit better with the color. I have the Sneetches here. I think Cat in the Hat is probably the correct cover for comparing the Call of Cthulhu, but I think my copy of that is in my kid's room right now, and he's asleep. But you can see how I think a little bit more color just, makes it pop a little bit more and kind of evokes the Dr. Seuss feel a little bit more. I don't know what he was going for with just the white, black, and red. It really begs for another color. I don't know exactly what book this is sort of evoking. My instincts are Horton Hears a Who, which I don't have that book. I have Horton Hatches the Egg, which is, similar, where it uses a lot more white on the cover. But even this has a second color in the red. Another possibility for an influence on the cover could be How the Grinch Stole Christmas. But, even though this uses a lot of white, it also has the green. It has the halftone pink in the eyes. And I think that's what this cover could have really used. If the Shoggoth could have been a halftone green with, maybe yellow eyes in the moon, and then have the white just for the mountains, I think that would be a little bit more juicy cover. Whereas I think just the white and black and red is a little unassuming. And like I said, I thought I was going to give this a slightly lower rating than Call of Cthulhu, which I think I probably would give, 3 nostrils. But I'm going to give this 3.5 nostrils. And if not for the cover, I would probably have given it 4 nostrils. But I think the cover is really disappointing. It doesn't quite live up to the contents, which is a shame. But everything else about this book I really love. I think it is the better book. I really like the colors inside and the story and the artwork. And in fact, I love it so much that I think I'm going to release, I'm not sure if I mentioned this already, but I think I'm going to release a special read-along version of this and just kind of read through this story and kind of give you a feel for the text. And I'll, maybe I'll release that today or in the next couple days. I'm not sure if I said that already, but I'm really inspired to do that because I really do enjoy this book. And I should mention that At the Mountains of Madness is slightly longer than Call of Cthulhu. And, both of these books are actually quite heftier than, your average, full-length Dr. Seuss book. They're about twice as long. And, those full-length Dr. Seuss books, they're pretty long to begin with. And like I said, this is twice as long. So, I mean, you could easily read it in one sitting. But, if you were reading it out loud, you might want to take a break because it's a bit of a slog to read out loud. But that's all for today, Nostril Heads. If you like this program and you want to get early access to my videos, you can become a member of the channel or of the Patreon. You can join the Patreon to get access to uncensored versions of my videos, especially Canonically Crumb. As well, you'll be thanked at the end of the episode. And if you don't care about that, well, you can just flick off.
Smoke your hog, get out your bed, darling, taking a rib.